Greetings, my friends. As promised, here we are with the Chapter 1 breakdown and walkthrough on PowerPoint notes. Remember, if you have any questions on these or anything within the learning module number 1, don't hesitate to send me an email or a Canvas message. Big point today is just to go over some of the things about studying history, why we approach it the way that we do, why it's important, why I believe it's important. I've chosen it as a career and firmly believe that you really can use the study of history to better yourself, your community, and really anybody that you come in contact with, as long as you have a good, proper understanding of what the point of history is. And the point of history simply is to try to make sense of why human beings acted the way that they do, or in this case, the way that they did. It's hard sometimes to figure out why people act the way they do. Human beings are, without a doubt, the most unpredictable things that probably have ever been around on this planet, other than maybe the weather. But human beings and human action is usually, not always, but usually it's a consequence, it's a reflection of the surrounding historical context, okay? So what that means is that you live in a context, meaning say you live for 75 years, okay, or 100 years. You're born in 1900, okay, and you pass away in the year 2000. And we, as historians and people, want to go back and we want to look at a certain person who lived between the year 1900 and the year 2000. How do we do it? What do we look at? All right. Where you start and what you have to do is you have to understand the context that that person lived in. Okay, what was life like? What did he or she experience around them on a daily basis, much like what do you and I experience around us on a daily basis? So for instance, once we are done and gone, okay, unless they figure out some, holy grail or eternal life on earth that probably is going to happen during our lifetimes, but you never know. What one thing that historians are going to really want to look at with people who lived during this era, obviously, is how did they react to this crazy year that we're going through, all right? This year, 2020, with everything going on, all right, contextually around us, the disease, the pandemic, the political strife and disagreements, and I mean, you name it, we're all living in it. We're kind of flowing in it like a river, okay? And it affects us. It affects how we act. It affects what we write, right? It affects how we live, all right? And so what historians are going to have to do 100, 200 years off in the future is they're going to be like, well, why did these people write that? Why did they act like that? What it was, they'll look at, oh, I don't know, just anything. They'll look at sporting events and they'll be like, well, what was it like to cheer for sports or be a fan of a sporting team when you weren't allowed to even go to watch their game? Those types of things, all right? The historical context cannot be ignored. Okay, it shapes you, it affects you. And what it also does is it doesn't excuse your actions. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at all. All right. So for instance, there are certain truths that run throughout history, regardless of time period or context. Easiest one to probably think of is don't kill people. You're not allowed to kill people unless in very weird certain situations like warfare and that type of thing. But by and large, all human societies, no matter of civilization, culture, race, creed, whatever, throughout history, they've generally had an agreement that you shouldn't kill another person, okay? And so if one is, for instance, a mass murderer, okay, or some terrible individual like, Hitler or Mao or Stalin or somebody like that who killed millions of people by their decisions and their orders, that's a pretty easy one. You're allowed to be like, yeah, we judge you, all right? You're not allowed to do that, and I don't care when you lived, okay? But other things are a little bit more touchy, icky, hard to contextualize, all right? Things like, for instance, I'm not a big believer in political correctness, all right? You guys will learn that with me, okay? I think it stifles free speech. Let's just talk about something awkward, okay? One of the great founding fathers of all time, more often seen as like the founder, of America, George Washington, has all these great attributes and all these good things, but then he also owned slaves, and he had slave quarters on his estate at Mount Vernon. How do we rectify that? How do people like me and you, how do you kind of not forgive that, but how do you figure out why? How did you, how about like somebody like George Washington, who had all these fantastic features and everything? How do you rectify that with someone? The answer, friends, is context, historical context. I'm not excusing George Washington and saying that it was okay, but what I'm saying is in that era, all right, across the board in historical context, even though we today know it's terribly wrong, unbelievably awful, and should never have happened, the bottom line was that slavery, whether it was slavery in America or slavery in ancient Rome and Greece that we're going to talk about, slavery was accepted. People knew it was probably wrong, definitely wrong in many cases, but it was just like, it's part of life, it's accepted. So that's the thing that you have to worry about with historical context sometimes is you got to go into those things and you're like, geez, how do I make sense of that? You make sense of it by figuring out the W's, okay? In our class, we're going to talk about, who's involved, what happened, when did it happen, where did it happen, okay? Who, what, when, where, all right? If you can kind of get those things down, all right, then you can start to figure out, most importantly, the most interesting thing probably, all right, of this course, gets into how we can make history make sense to us, trying to make connections and find connections to the modern world. And that's the point of our first couple assignments and activities is, can I look at something like Hammurabi's Code and make sense of it? Even though it's written 3,000 years ago, can I look at this law and be like, hey, we still kind of do stuff like that. And here's why, all right? And here's where we do stuff like that, all right? That's when history becomes fun. Move on to the next slide here. Trying to make yourself work through or get through pages 4 and 5, okay, where they begin to talk about things like Neanderthals, the differences between ancient humans, Neanderthals, Homo sapiens. Make sure that you're taking a look at the dates, okay, and that you're realizing that around 30,000 and 25,000 BCE, that's just a staggeringly long time ago, all right? Something happened to the genetic code. Human beings began to evolve and make changes in a way that affected things like the size of our brains, the ability of us to increase the amount of protein, which, if you know anything about biology, protein, and I'm not a biologist, but, the more we could eat protein, things like, meats and those and milk and those types of things, it creates reactions in your brain and the ability to build those types of structures. And human beings began to, and these are two reconstructions from natural history museums. You can tell the differences, the structural differences between a Neanderthal, ancient human, and the quote unquote modern looking human being from a recreation from a skeletal structure that was found in, I believe that skeletal structure there on the right is from an individual somewhere in ancient Europe. You can see the Neanderthal is kind of skinnier. He would have been shorter. The Homo sapien, you can tell the head is differently shaped. The brain case is larger. They're able to make quick, more evolutionary type decisions. Okay, those types of things. So read up on that, pages 4 and 5. Right, know the differences between those two things. Human migration is something that's really interesting. Okay, and you'll read about this on pages 5 through 9 of our textbook. All right, the largely held belief is that human beings radiated, meaning they came out of, and you can see from this map here, they came out of Africa. Okay, the most ancient human beings have been found to be right in that kind of sub-Saharan area of Africa. Again, right along, following kind of along the very bottom parts of the Nile River, and from there spread throughout the globe over hundreds and thousands of years of migration. Human beings making different types of changes, adaptations, okay, was the word that Charles Darwin eventually gave to it, adaptations to local environments, okay? And so the reason that human beings, even today, look so different from different parts of the world, date back to ancient patterns of migration. For instance, pigmentation and skin color, those are all related back to where the ancient ancestors settled, more cold northern climates, more southernly hot climates that affected all kinds of things. Okay, and you'll see from your readings of page 5 through 9 that human beings made their way out of Africa into what you can see is there now the modern kind of Middle East, and then up into Europe, out into Asia, and then eventually across the seas, the land bridge that once connected what would be Alaska and the far eastern parts of Russia. And then eventually human populations coming into North America. The era, friends, is known as the Paleolithic Age. All right, it's the age of kind of stones and bones. All right, check out the dates on pages 9 through 11. The Paleolithic era is it's a long swath of time period, and it kind of covers an area. I know it's really crazy long to think about, from like about, well, I don't know, 1.5 million, 2 million years ago up until about 15,000, 10,000 years ago. That's just a huge swath of time. All right, and during that time period, if you think about that, from 2 million years ago to about 10,000 years ago, that's so many years. We've only been, quote unquote, had civilization for about, 2,500 years, about 2,500 years, as we've seen, as or maybe a little bit longer than that. Probably, maybe more along the lines of let's put it more at, 4,000 years. Okay, that human beings have made civilizations. That's not a long time. Okay, we've made unbelievable advances, technological advances in those 4,000 years. But for the majority of human history, human beings lived in Paleolithic societies. They made tools from bones, from stones. Read about that on pages 9 through 11. They lived in small groups, no more than 25 to 40, okay? Meaning that you lived with kind of, you know, your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, maybe a couple cousins, grandma and grandpa, and that was your tribe, that was your group, and that's who you lived with the majority of your life. You didn't interact much during the Paleolithic era with other tribes. You know, it would be easy, you know, modern society coming to play here, modern connections. You didn't want to interact much with tribes because different tribes would have different diseases, different types of sicknesses that you could pass from one another. So it was a very closed time period. And like I said, modern connections are all over the place here if you choose to look for them in your reading. One of the things that historians and you know, paleontologists essentially are what these individuals who study this are called. What they have found that is even way back when, you know, hundreds of thousands of years ago, it's just the way that we're made, human beings. We broke down things in terms of division of labor along gender lines. Now, we broke down those things along gender lines, with men doing certain occupations and women doing other occupations. Why did we do that? Oh, no, I don't know. It's just like, it's just kind of the way that it happened. You know, in our modern world of trying to, you know, say that, you know, and rightly, you know, that they're, you know, don't deny women the right to do these types of jobs, you know, such as, oh, I don't know, you know, things that are generally seen as, you know, man jobs or male work, you know, I don't know, construction and, you know, brain surgeon, those types of things. Now we're like, yeah, women can do those types of occupations, certainly. Okay. But in the past, there was a very strict, and up until very recently, very strict division of labor that men went out and did the hunting and women had other things that they did for the tribe and for the group. Please read about those on pages 9 through 11. All right. Early human societies, certainly, friends, they were nomadic. Okay. They moved from place to place very often. All right. In search of better hunting grounds, in search of, you know, better grazing fields, those types of things. All right. And again, the groups were very small and kept mainly to themselves. Skip too far ahead there. Let's look at this. I really want you to look at page 11. On page 11 is really cool in your text because it also, and I show these pictures as well. I love these cave paintings that were left behind. They're really interesting to look at because the question is why? Why do this? Why would early human beings leave these behind? The reason is, guys, you know, if you've ever carved your name in a tree or, you know, I used to do this all the time. You see like wet cement, and you write your initials in the wet cement. Why the heck do you do that? You know what? Because you just want to, there's something inside of us that you want people to remember that you were here. I was here. I did that. I did something. All right. And you do those types of things. All right. That's why I love the one in the bottom right with the handprints. All right. Made with a mixture of kind of ancient paint as well as blood. They've done samples on that. A lot of that is blood mixed with some ancient dye and paint. All right. To keep the color. And you just sort of splat your hand up on the wall. So I was here. All right. And this is what I saw. You see the drawings of ancient horses, buffalo, bulls, those types of things. All right. I love those pictures because what they tell us is even tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years ago, human beings still had this desire to say, I was here. And this is what I saw. This is an interesting slide to talk about. Like I said, I'm always wanting and very interested to see student reaction to this slide and these facts. The fact that Earth's climate changes all the time. All right, no matter if human beings are, polluting it as we do today, or otherwise, the Earth's climate tends to change a lot. Okay, why? Well, the biggest thing is, if you're a fan of facts and science and science like I am, all right, it has to do with that little thing that's way up there in the sky, about 93 million miles away, called the sun. Okay, and every once in a while, the sun decides it's going to, it's a nuclear reactor. The sun is a gigantic nuclear reactor, if you know anything about it. And every so often, it waxes and wanes. It goes up and down. It produces more heat, and then it produces less heat. And weirdly, when it produces less heat, it has an effect on the surrounding planets. Or if it produces more heat, it has an effect on the surrounding planets. And weirdly, the climate tends to go up and down just as the sun's temperature goes up and down. Earth entered, a real, and read the dates on this, pages 4 and 5. Earth entered around 2 million years ago, a cold phase, and the glaciers would advance out of the North and the South poles. And it changed. Why? All right, it couldn't have been because of all the Neanderthals and the ancient humans, driving around their cars and their SUVs, polluting the environment. That didn't make the climate change. All right, so this is that interesting kind of awkward thing, is that you have to kind of move past the fact that the climate, while it's very important, it's not just particular to us. We love to think that we're special, and that's okay. We all are very special indeed. But like weather records, where we're like, it's never been this warm or this cold on this date. Okay, sure, whatever you say. Because our weather records go back to, like, in some cases, like 1870. Okay, great. So we really think that we got it nailed down. Like, it's never been 95 degrees here on this date ever. It's so narcissistic and full of ourselves that we can be, that modern humans can be, that we think no one else ever in the world ever encountered anything like this. You study history long enough, you realize people have encountered a lot of stuff that's very similar, and you can learn from it. Okay, you can go back and you can study from it, and you can see, how did they react to that? All right, and one of the cool things is, around the year 10,000, those glaciers, because of a lot of different things, including the sun heating up a bit, those glaciers recede. They go back up into where they kind of are around today in the year 2020. And the problem is, guys, that, or not the problem, the cool thing is that they leave behind all these remnants of things behind, like, the Great Lakes. Those are glacial lakes. Those are big, indentations, ancient indentations in Earth's surface. And as the glaciers receded, it left behind a puddle, giant puddles. All right, but things like rivers, Mississippi River, Ohio River, all that, those are and have been carved out by glacial recession during this time period. Please read about it on pages 4 and 5. What happens is human beings then begin this thing known as the Neolithic or New Stone Age revolution, the agricultural revolution. We talked about this a little bit in the early parts of our class, but the domestication of animals is huge. Please read about that coming up on and within chapter 1. That genetic engineering, how it's accomplished, how you take certain animals that have certain characteristics that you like amongst the pig, for instance, or the dog, and you separate the one that you like out from the herd, and then you find another one that has similar characteristics that you like. You separate those two out and you put them somewhere and you have them essentially breed. You breed, you know, the pig characteristics that you like in, and you breed out the pig characteristics that you don't like. So for instance, like I said, you know, ancient pigs or boars were mean animals, and you can still see remnants of boars, you know, or running around even in modern America. Big tusks, they'll charge at you. They're ugh. Right? But what happens is over time, people start to realize that if we can catch one of these things, like one of the slower ones, and put it on a fire, it tastes really good. And I would have loved to have been, you know, a fly on the cave of, you know, the first person to eat bacon. You know, you'd be like, ooh, that was delicious, and I'd like to have more of that. And so what people began to do is domesticate the pig. Okay, instead of, when they caught the slower one from the herd, instead of eating it immediately, they were like, don't eat that one yet. Catch another one that's kind of like it, and then put them over there and make them make more of those kind of pigs. Okay, and we'll leave the wild ones out there because they're mean, and we'll eat the ones that we can genetically engineer, primitively, albeit, but the ones over here that we can put in the pen and that won't run away with us or smash us with their tusks, we'll use those ones. All right. Ancient humans did the same thing with crops, with corn, with your wheat, those types of things. They did all that. And the point is, guys, is around the year, sometime between 10,000 and 5,000, you had the key, the big key for your early human beings. And that is right there on the notes, the surplus. For the first time in human history, there was, in certain societies, some civilizations around the world, okay, and the first one we're going to look at where this happens is in Mesopotamia. There's a surplus of food for certain, not all the time, but for certain periods of time, there's a surplus of food, meaning you can grow and create and domesticate more food than you need at the time, which you can then store it. You can put it underground. You can put it in jars. You can preserve it with salt. And when human beings are able to do that, when they're able to know where their next meal is coming from, because I've either salted the beef or I've dug far enough underground to preserve in the cool temperatures some food for later, when that happens, human beings tend to create revolutionary things. Okay, when they know where their next meal is coming from, when they're not gripped constantly by fear and hunger, all right, societies tend to explode. Okay, and societies tend to create. All right, and when you have more food and more leisure time, and you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, and you're kind of, you know, you got full belly and you're sitting around, you're looking for something to do. You know, I'm not, you know, revealing any, you know, truths that people don't know here. You know what happens with human beings? You make little human beings. If you got, you know, full belly, a little leisure time, you know, what are we going to do? Well, yeah, we're going to talk about, you know, new things like we're going to create religious beliefs, formulate religious beliefs. We're going to look at things like math and language and writing, but we're also going to make many, many, many little human beings. And when you make many, many, many new little human beings, you know what you have to find out, you know what you have to find. And you guys, if you know, you're going to go through this as you get older and you start to have families, or maybe you already have families now, what you start to realize is you start making more human beings. What do you got to find? You got to find a place to put them all. Okay. And ancient societies had to figure out, what the heck are we going to do with all these new human beings? We've got to start finding bigger places to put all these new human beings. And that, friends, is where civilization comes from. When you get mass amounts of human beings coming together in enclosed spaces, close spaces. Yes, you do have the opportunity for more disease. We all know that, okay? But we're going to talk about this in this class too. Ancient societies, guys, there were diseases all over the place that were even so much worse than the modern diseases and things that are floating around now. So much worse, but they lived life. How'd they do it? Why did they do it? Why didn't they all just go inside? Why didn't they all social distance and get away from each other? Why didn't they all wear masks? They didn't. They lived life and they made choices that, yeah, life is scary. And I may not make it till tomorrow. And I'm going to go out anyway. And I'm going to try and persevere, and I'm going to create. And those are things essential to civilization. The creation of things by human beings that are saying, I want a better life. I want more. Okay. And those essential characteristics, those things are truly interesting to look at. I mentioned some earlier, things like writing, building larger buildings. Okay, all these things that we're going to look at in chapter 2 when we get into Mesopotamia. And remember, the essential characteristics of civilization are things that I want you to choose what you think is most important for one of our activities coming up in this course. All right, so hope you enjoyed our walkthrough here of the chapter 1 notes. Let me know again if you have any questions. And friends, I will talk to you soon. Take care.